Welcome to book club number 1 on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. We are very excited to have this back up and running. People are probably going to join as we're doing this, so pay no mind. Welcome, Alyssa, if you can see us or hear us. Um, so yeah, let's just dive right in. How much knowledge do we have collectively about the Tibetan Book of the Dead? Are we all going in blind? Do we have colloquial knowledge? I guess.
I've heard it referenced many times by many of my favorite thinkers like Alan Watts and Timothy
Same,
Leary,
same.
and Alan Moore, and Robert Anton
Yeah,
Wilson.
yeah.
So it certainly feels like it's just like a must do at a certain stage of my life,
Yeah,
and I'm pretty fine with it being now.
definitely, definitely.
Well,
Yeah.
as well as like all the fucking change in the world and my own life and everything as well
Yeah,
at the same time. It
yeah.
feels like kind of fitting in many ways.
Big time, big
So
time.
yes, I will leave you to introduce the rest of this whilst I make
Yeah,
a
Jake has to
short trip.
run and get drugs quickly. So sorry.
Smart.
Sorry, guys. He has to make a drug. Sorry, hang on. One more person's coming. Hi, George.
Hey,
So yeah, anyone else want to share about their sort of colloquial knowledge on the Tibetan Book of the Dead? If you've heard about it in passing, blah blah blah.
I only heard Special Agent Dale Cooper quote it in Twin
Yes.
Peaks, and that was my only real frame of reference before book club, other than like again seeing it on shelves at bookstores and stuff.
Yes, Twin Peaks is definitely going to be important coming up. So yeah, definitely that's a good one. Anyone else?
I heard Carl Jung was really inspired by the book to write the right book.
Yes,
Cool.
definitely. When I get into the history, we'll get into Jung, definitely.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I remember reading like a Dalai Lama book when I was 15 or something, and I think that was the first time I heard the name. But to be honest, since then I haven't learned more about it. So I'm quite excited about diving into it.
Cool. Courtney, how about you?
Yeah, I heard a few years ago Duncan Trussell was interviewing someone on his podcast, and I heard them speak about it then, and it was just like really, it was a synchronicity moment for me because I was just like, wow, it really captured me. But I haven't really like dived into it in any depth, so I'm like was very pleased that this came up. This opportunity.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The Tibetan Book of the Dead is like one of those books that everyone talks about, but no one's actually read. So we are among the elite here today, actually tackling it. I've done some brief skimming, and it is going to be a little bit of a challenge. Sorry, guys, 2 seconds. Oh, yeah. Sorry if you can still hear me. Camera issues. Jake will fix it when he gets back. But you can still hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So it is going to be a little bit of a challenge undertaking, but I'm sure we're all sort of capable of deciphering it. And I have got a bunch of guides to sort of help us through as well, because like I said, it's going to be a little bit heavy in terms of Buddhist concepts and stuff that I doubt any of us are super familiar with, unless you are. Is anyone here super familiar with Buddhist concepts?
A little bit.
Well, then feel free to help us along. Seriously, like this is sort of like a sharing thing. So any resources anyone else finds, just like feel free to throw them in the chat. Yeah. So we'll sort of just be piecing it together as we go along. But yeah, anyway, moving on. Moving into some of the history of the Bardo Thodol. I'm glad someone mentioned Jung, because it was actually one of the main inspirations behind Red Book. And Jung was also really, really, really fascinated by Tibetan Buddhism in general. And it really served as like foundational in terms of his theories on consciousness. And I guess that gets into the first kind of round of questioning when it comes to like our sharing today, which is like, what do we hope to get out of diving into this? And I guess I'll go first, and then everyone else can kind of, go as they please. And for me, I guess I hope to get insight into the nature of consciousness through reading the Bardo Thodol. I also hope to learn more about the process of death as well. And I also hope to, I guess, find out how it pertains to life, because a lot of the people who are inspired by it talk about how it also has concepts in it that are relevant to living. It's not just sort of a text that's about death. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to get from it. So yeah, feel free to share what you're hoping to get from it. Anyone can go first. Or I'll pick who goes first. How about you, Courtney?
Okay. So what am I hoping to get out of it? Look, I've been kind of interested in the death and dying process for a long time, but haven't really had an access point. And I've been wanting to do it in my work as well. Like, it's kind of been a future area of interest that I kind of want to be able to assist people in that process of death and dying. So I would like to, at some point reorient myself towards that kind of process and how to maybe do that with some additional knowledge.
Amazing. Anyone else?
I was really hoping, Courtney, you were going to say you intended to work in the underworld soon. This was really nice and synchronous for me too, because this year, some people in the Discord know I was kind of like challenging myself to do some regular poetry writing with like a card prompt kind of divination tool. And the figure of death was frequently prompted by the deck of cards that I was using to write with. So I was really enjoying exploring death as a figure and a personification. So it'll be really interesting to see just like this whole other mythos and cultural history and philosophy, like death as a process, death as a space outside the body. I think that'll be really cool. I'm also, interested to just kind of see, I've been honing my like sense of life and reality, as again, the book club often does for us. It'd be really cool to see if I read things that really keenly describe stuff that feel right or true to other parts of my world. Yeah, looking forward to that.
Amazing. Who's next?
Similar to what you said, Angie, about kind of facing the idea of death and integrating it to your awareness and how you go through life. But also, like on another scale, like I feel now also approaching 30 and Saturn return, it feels like it's the death of an era. And then there's like something about rebirth, and then how to kind of be guided through this rebirth upcoming.
Nice. How about you, George?
Well, death is a subject that really interested me in like many ways. Whereas like the death of the body, death of the soul, death of like society, of Western society, you may say. So, and like I have like a very like cursing understanding of like Buddhism and concepts like karma and dharma and so on and so on. But I think like understand like how death can like be like a transformational process. It's like really interesting to me. Yeah.
Definitely. Sid, sorry, I muted him because he was like shuffling around. Hang on. 2 seconds. Oh, sorry. There you go. Sid, you should be able to be audible now. Do you want to share what you hope to get out of diving into this?
Yeah.
I see a cat tail.
This is the, oh yeah, she's in and out of frame right now. My Bella. I mean, there's a lot that has. Oh, there she comes. Yeah, there's a lot that has just been going on for a while now that has kind of made me more aware of kind of like the our proximity to the tomb. There's like been just like a lot of really strange random things that I've noticed, like just symbols and obviously right now I don't know if whoever in the Discord is like chatting this past week. I was sharing about how like there's a situation going on with my dad who is not I don't really know him. He's basically a stranger to me. Like I haven't been really in touch with him in like over a decade, but it's still just weird. You know, it's much more fresh. It's much more vivid when like you know, somebody who was a big part of your life, obviously somebody who had tried to be involved in raising you is now on their way out. And even if it's something that you were prepared for because of your, you know, child of divorce where your parents, you know, have pretty nasty things to say about each other, it's being so close to that. I don't know, the proximity to death and like facing it, and like all now there's all this mounting pressure about like you know what to do. He's going to be going on hospice, all this stuff, and it's like it's so like removed from like what all of the depths of like, you know, facing the abyss like that are, you know, facing the, it's just weird. Like we're talking about all this stuff and I'm like so dissociated from it because I'm still just like, this is like so stark and like but I guess that's just part of it, you know, like we talk about with other, you know, diving into the stuff, and a lot of it seems trite, but it's important to kind of get these concepts and ideas out. And I don't know, I'm looking forward to kind of engaging with that kind of underworld energy, because there's been so much that's been circling my life this past year more directly, I guess, that has made me really kind of want to be more contemplative about that sort of thing. And, you know, I don't know, just re-examine a lot of, you know, what drives us to the ends that we find ourselves at, and how we end up in the places that we are when we are, and where you want to be, I guess, when you're going to have to face that, you know, inevitable oblivion, I guess. So that's what's driving me, at least.
So you're facing the depths in like a very real sort of sense, which I think is really gonna be quite a profound experience in terms of going through this book. I think, yeah, it's really interesting to hear all of our reasons for wanting to dive into this, and from what I've heard, it's quite a life-changing text in the same way that the Red Book is. So I'm sure we're all gonna get a lot out of it. But yeah, I guess moving on to the history now that Jake is back. Sorry, he had to go get drugs.
Hey, Sid.
You like my hat?
Oh, love it, dude. Oh, that's awesome.
It's DeAntwoord too. We found it at like a thrift shop.
Yeah, brilliant. Nice find. Nice.
Well, yeah, to dive into a little bit of the history. Well, the Book of the Dead is kind of seen a little bit more as a Western spiritual text, ironically, than Tibetan one, because Tibetan Buddhists actually have a lot of funerary texts, and the Book of the Dead is like a pretty minor one.
Well, it's not even a whole book.
No,
it's just like it's a portion of one book that they've got.
Yeah, but then there was sort of a British colonist who went to Tibet, and he sort of, you know, read a bunch of Tibetan funerary texts and was fascinated by the Book of the Dead. He was a theosophist as well. He was a disciple of Madame Blavatsky, which is really interesting. And he translated and popularized the Book of the Dead in the Western world. And it's actually had like a major impact on Western culture. A lot of the stuff that we love is inspired by it, from Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, which is basically about traveling through the Bardo states, which we'll learn a lot about through this book club, to you know, the Beatles' Revolver album, to Twin Peaks, to just about everything we love and discuss has the Book of the Dead has touched it in some way.
I also noticed when I was writing the acronym for the title of this book club that the Dark Side of the Moon is almost the same acronym, but just with B and D switched around. And so bit. I don't know if the Dark Side of the Moon is the Bardos in reverse, and maybe that's like even partly why. I don't know. It was just a very odd coincidence. I was like, that's definitely not a fucking mistake, especially with the themes of the album and everything else, right? So,
yeah, maybe. Who knows? I feel like I need to I feel like everyone should re-listen to the album again. It's also a very Saturnian album with its themes on time and on the journey of life and death, on all of these things. It's fascinating. Also Twin Peaks, dealing with the concept of the bardo, which is sort of a liminal state between life and death. And Cooper's experiences are very similar to what we're going to be uncovering in the Book of the Dead.
It almost sounds like the Bardo is what Robert Anton Wilson describes in A Chapel Perilous, in like that kind of phraseology or sort of
big time. If you're
transformational kind of limbo, kind of what do you call it?
If you're a Robert Anton Wilson fan, like there are definitely a lot of references in his work to
like
the
a
Book of the
liminal
Dead.
spiritual space where you're tested and come out the other side.
Basically that. And yeah, so the Bardo is sort of this intermediate state between life and death. And the Book of the Dead sort of takes us through these different Bardos where the soul is tested. It's a text about transformation. It's a place where one enters a suspended reality in a way where one can have transformation. And this doesn't necessarily have to be about the process of death. It could be something that occurs in life. The psychedelic process or the psychedelic experience is often sort of compared to the Bardo experience. The ritual state as well. All sorts of different states of
Just like
consciousness can be considered bardos, basically.
That's like new phases of life and stuff as well, right?
There are lots of ways that you could apply the concept of the bardo. And yeah, the point of the Book of the Dead is to help the dying soul be liberated from samsara. But obviously not everybody makes it because it's quite a perilous journey. The little bit I've read is, I mean, it is a little bit morbid. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, especially if you're somebody who's squeamish with the concept of death, and I definitely am, big time. And I was sort of listening to the introduction, and it's like, yeah, straight up throws you right in there with dead bodies and like somebody's died, and the lama is chanting the incantations over the dead body, and it's very visceral.
Well, that's the context in which this stuff was written, basically, was that it should be spoken aloud over someone's dead body because it is like a funeral rite. And so when you try to remind yourself more of that context, it sort of is less oh shit.
Yeah, it's like
so I know there's supposed to be like a dead body in front of me.
Yeah,
like,
pretty much.
Like,
pretty much.
Supposed to be at a funeral.
Yeah.
So,
what are our attitudes towards death here? Are we is everyone else chicken shit like I am? Because immediately I was like expecting it to be like Red Book where it'd be like mystical, but then it like hits you in the face with death immediately, and it's like I was like, oh, this isn't fun. This is a bit but yeah, what are your attitudes?
So this week I watched a 7-hour movie from Hungary called Second Tango, directed by Batar. I didn't watch like in one sitting. I watched like 1 hour each day, so couldn't do it. But like the whole movie, like with one exception, I won't spoil it, but like the whole movie feels like death and decay. Like in Hungary, like early 90s after the USSR ended. Felt like the whole ambient was dying slowly. There was the trees or the houses or in a certain way the people too, because everything like dire and constantly wet and cold. So like those ambients where like everything seems so like, excuse my French, but fucked. Like that always interests me because that's always some type of places that new things can blossom, you know? Like I'm really into like studying like the punk scene from the 70s, both in the US and the UK, and like in both places, like Switzerland was like, screwed. Like economy was shit. It was like dangerous fuck, and that's how like made like Sex Pistols and like I don't know, fucking Ramones, Blondie, Television, like whatever. All these bands came from. Like so, yeah, that really interests me. Like in like transformational process. Like,
Definitely. So you're looking at it more in terms of a cycle rather than this sort of finality.
yes.
Which is which is healthy. Anyone else?
I haven't really had very many people close to me die. I've only had one grandparents die. And that was like maybe 3-4 years ago. was interesting was that during our time reading the Red Book, I had my first and to date only dream of her since her passing. And it was a very spirited, Jung-esque presentation of her in death, which was not only, satisfying, so to speak, for us having that book club experience at the time, but called me in a totally new way into relationship to whether it is her or the concept of her outside of time in the place of death, right? That was really the first major like shakeup of my conception of death since it kind of being introduced to me as a young child person where there's a dead animal or something like that. So in this way, I've always felt like I'm waiting for a very close important, not that my grandmother's passing was not important, but it was expected and we had several years to kind of get ready for it, so I feel like I'm waiting for like a big one I'm not ready for to really impact my world. And in this way I do kind of see investing in this book as kind of like not like a down payment, but like some protective preparatory material to kind of like house myself in when that thing I see in the distance coming vaguely.
Yeah, definitely. I feel the same way big time because I'm in a similar position where I've not, knock on wood, lost anyone close to me yet, but it's like grandma's getting up there in age, like, all of these things. And yeah, death has always been something that has terrified me. So it's like
Well, it does. It definitely sucks. I've experienced both ways, where it's sort of like someone old and you're expecting that, and then someone absolutely the opposite. Someone that in my family is like hosted Boxing Day, and that was the life of the party, and so that is really weird. It's very strange, and I don't know if I've still fully processed it, if I'm completely honest. Like, it was only probably a year ago. But yeah, every time I meet kind of that side of my family, it's really tough because it's kind of almost impossible to not imagine what Paul or whatever, would have thought or said or whatever in the situation. So it's just it's very hard.
definitely.
Something you don't want to wish anybody. It manages to kind of go their whole life without experiencing. But as you said, Alex, you kind of know eventually.
But we're also all gonna go there one day. We are all going to experience it, which is precisely why the Book of the Dead exists. And I find cultures that have like underworld narratives and books of the dead and stuff like super fascinating, because obviously we are in a culture that doesn't deal very well with death, in my opinion. Even just being Nigerian, the difference between the way that we do death and like mourn death is very different from the way that I see in Western culture, which sort of pushes it to the side and like
I think there's a healthy balance in between somewhere.
I knew you were gonna say some shit.
In Nigerian culture, people pay people to come and mourn at their funeral. To come and make a big drama and a big scene and like oh my god, this is the greatest man. And I feel like there's a healthy balance between like the British stoicism of like, I'm all right, mate, it's okay. And, like,
there are some places in Latin America that do that too.
Really?
I think Mexico does that.
Nice.
It's the more spicy cultures that like, I feel like the more spicy cultures, when we deal with death, it's like we really emote, and then also it's also seen as like a celebration afterwards. Like in Nigerian culture, there's always a big party that comes along with the funeral, and the person's casket is always sort of carried around and paraded around. And it's almost pagan because it's all about like catharsis, and there are all these like weird steps in order to accomplish these sort of cathartic emotions surrounding death. And like I don't know. I feel like in Western culture, it's very sort of like medicalized and sanitized. And
it's
people
also
don't really
like
know.
a really highly regulated industry, the funeral industry. So they, kind of play a part in the disconnection of that process with, you know, a dead body and death, and it's just not something that in Western culture we really grow up being exposed to.
Yeah.
It's so
Unless your
disconnected.
family works in that industry.
In
Yeah,
that
totally.
case, you're probably like minted.
Yeah, there was a couple
Yeah.
of kids I went to college with that were a family of stonemasons that have done headstones like locally in Buckinghamshire, whatever, for like 200 years or something. So there was like a the way that they sort of dealt or spoke about funerals or having to just work. It was just work a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
So there is this detachment to it in many ways that you have to have. You have to like. It was really interesting getting high with that guy. It's like you're trying to make this thing of beauty that like fucking represents somebody, but at the same time, like it's just your job, so you can't like get kind of too attached or
Emotionally
kind of whatever
invested
with it
in
because
the
Right.
everyone's gonna have a tragic story in some capacity, so you can't kind of get carried away in those ways. So but yeah, it is very segregated between like if you weren't in the trade of death then you would be totally outside of that and not really get much insight into the process of it because I don't know. I think was reading Jerusalem. I feel like it didn't used to be that way. I feel like that's a very post World War II sort of modern era type thing. So like what Alan Moore describes in sort of the pre-World War I era time of Northampton was that there are these women called deathmongers who are actually what would you call
they were like midwives.
midwives, so they would help bring life into the world, but then also they were because infant mortality is so high still in the world, like they are the people that are led to kind of charge dealing with those situations as well, so that they're kind of the most experienced people with life and death like in the community. But then through sort of NHS and institutionalization and this kind of thing of healthcare and everything else, which is largely good, it then gets very separated from that very human kind of connection of something where, it would have been this person that you knew in your community that kind of dealt with a lot of this stuff versus like, oh, I need to go to a company to deal with this. Kind of thing.
I hate. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that what came to my mind. I don't know if it happens in other cultures, but I grew up in Eastern Europe, and when I was kind of flicking through old albums of my grandparents and great grandparents, and they all had like a funeral picture with like whoever died in the middle, and then all the guests of the funeral behind them, like with the corpse exposed. And for me, that was really interesting because you don't see that anymore.
No way.
Or
Fascinating.
even Victorian culture where the dead were photographed as well. I mean, it's quite morbid to modern sensibilities, but the way the pictures were taken were so loving.
I think they're just trying to really prove Native Americans were wrong.
It puts the soul back in the dead body if you take a picture. No, because I don't know, I'm weird. I like to look at stuff like that because I don't know the way that they like dress the bodies and like some of them are like very young children, and it's like actually like this really loving thing. It's not like morbid at all. It's quite beautiful.
Don't they do that in Louisiana as well?
In Louisiana?
Yeah, isn't there like somewhere in the South in America where they still do this?
No, I don't.
There's in like New Orleans and Louisiana, there's definitely more of a celebratory style death culture for a lot of different groups of people, like parading in the streets, jazz bands accompanying the corpse to their grave place and stuff. But and not to be an expert on Louisiana, I'm kind of farther away from it in the U.S., but I don't know about the photographing part potentially, but could be a research project.
Again, I treat the subject matter with utter respect.
Jake's history.
We also like to. You gotta have fun with everything, right?
Jake's stoned history.
No. But I definitely remember seeing like a viral Reddit post like a few years ago of like this black guy dead with his PS3 and like laid up in this chair, and all of his homies coming through to like take pictures with him and stuff. And I just thought that was the most wild shit ever. So I guess, but you don't see stuff that's popping off like that anymore. So maybe it was just he's in a very special family.
Exactly.
I've seen like similar thing with, instead of people being buried, they kind of build this tomb which imitates their room, but this is also very ancient, like this is very like Thracian, and it's just like a modern twist, like people in the past liked horse riding, and they would bury their horse, and now they would bury their PS3 with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know.
But
I
it
feel like
has
I
a
would
very
be
old root. This tradition.
definitely,
Totally.
definitely. I feel like I would be a lot less afraid of death if we had a culture in the West that was more involved, and I actually saw that happening, because the few times I have encountered death and dying, it's felt clinical and somewhat removed to me, and then I start imagining myself in that position, and it like freaks me out. But then I look at other cultures, and it's like, actually that's kind of, I would feel more at peace knowing that that's how my soul was being sent off to rest in that sense. And I think this is also why there's this, I hate to bring up technological catastrophizing, but this is like what I do. But I feel like this is why there's such a focus on accelerationism in health and wellness, and even in the concept of like immortality and stuff, like in the West, these sort of utopian fantasies, because I feel like we are just like terrified of the concept of passing beyond our mortal frame or whatever.
Well, what I felt when the unexpected death happened was, it was just sort of a really stark reminder of like we were talking with Danica about free will the other day, and I feel like free will is like really closely associated with control. And yeah, just reminded how little of that you really have
Yeah.
over any real given situation that could just crop up
Yeah.
at any time, which for nothing, for no reason. There's no cause for anything.
Yeah.
It just happens.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of be ready to roll with those punches a lot of the time.
Yeah, definitely. But also all the technological sort of I guess stuff going on around the process of aging and death and dying right now also shows a real desire for an afterlife. Like despite the fact that we are in this secular society, God is dead, blah 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 blah, we still really deeply unconsciously desire an afterlife, or the notion that the soul will carry on in some form or another. And that's one other aspect of this book that I think really gave the Westerners who found it like hope, and why it has become such a fixture of like Western culture, especially in like the secular age. The Book of the Dead seems to be kind of a fixture in the sort of undercurrents of culture, because I think that it's like something that maybe speaks to a deeper desire to feel a little bit more rooted in a spiritual understanding of the process of like life, death, and dying, which we've lost. So yeah, I think that that's part of why it's so popular, and yeah, like basically everything that we love and talk about has been inspired by. I'm trying to think of anything else I can think of. Ubik by Philip K. Dick is also another one that's been inspired by the Book of the Dead. If anyone can think of anything else that they know that has been inspired, yell it out.
You're reminding me of like, the whole everything that's going on now with that man who's trying to like, Benjamin Button himself, and like the transhumanist movement where where it's like going back to not even like that terrible Johnny Depp movie, because nobody remembers that, Transcendence, but like the Lawnmower Man like shit, where it's like this techno feudalist hellscape where like, oh, Transcendence is just going to be you uploading your brain into a terrible like 64-bit like processor. Like it just sounds like shit. Like it doesn't sound like a good place for you to end up. But to bring back to Twin Peaks, to bring back a recommendation I've had many times before, because of like somebody brought up the separation of like the human connection with funeral services, like morticians, things like that. 6 Feet Under. There is this whole arc on that show where this Mike from Twin Peaks, you remember Mike, who ended up dating he was Bobby's friend who was doing like coke deals with him. He was on like the football team. But then he dated Nadine for a while when she got her head injury. Those,
That's right.
But anyway,
I hated that.
Let's not go down.
I remember.
Season 2 was a little crazy.
God damn.
But yeah, he is this like big corporate funeral kind of like scumbag, like cretin, who's going out and trying to buy up all these funeral homes, and he's a real issue in the first couple of seasons of the show. But it's interesting because the way that show depicts a lot of like cultural ways where they deal with death, or they celebrate it, and it's an interesting way, like blending like capitalism and like spiritualism. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff on that show that gets very existential, especially with like the ghost of their father, which is not a spoiler because it happens in the first 10 minutes of the show. He gets hit by a car or a bus, I think. But it's great. It's a really fantastic show. It makes you really think. It was the first thing that made me think really deeply about death beyond, like, the Pink Floyd line in Dark Side of the Moon where they're interviewing people, and they're just like, why be afraid of dying? We've all got to go sometime. Like, that was the way that I approached it. So I'm like, what's the fucking use of having, and then once I was close to it, when I'd first moved down here, and there was a church member who I was staying with when I first moved down, who passed away like 4 months after I was living here. And it's so stark and like real and just like blunt when it's just laid out in front of you. It's just, that's a person who was alive yesterday, and there's just nothing left in them now. And it's just a vessel that they departed from, right? Like, that was the first time that I got really intense death anxiety for the first time. And it was like I would continually get it, especially when I had like taken a hiatus from smoking weed, and then I came back to it, and it would just like hit me. And then obviously there's social anxieties with like politics and shit when I was getting involved in that in like 2015, 16. But I don't know, I've gotten to a much better place, but I'm still very curious, and I'm I don't know, I don't have any like certainty. Like, we watch something like Enter the Void, and it's like, what if literally entering the DMT space is like your transition into this other, you are able to kind of escape your body, but then if you don't have a grasp on it, then maybe you never come back. Although Gaspar, in a way, you never really know what he's going for exactly. But I don't know. It's interesting to me. I don't know what that kind of, I could talk about Jerusalem again, like what does lie beyond? What is our, what is the kind of like, I think, what is he, I think Terrence talks about this a lot. Like, is it the eschaton? Like what is like going to be our ferryman, like from this state to the next, is, I guess that's where my curiosity comes from. Although there is like the crushing potential of like oblivion that weighs heavy too. But like, I try to remain optimistic about where we are to go after this, existence, I guess.
Definitely.
As a quick, maybe topical one, has anybody seen The Boy and the Heron yet?
No,
I've heard interesting things on it though.
I'd see it.
Spoil it.
We will do
We're
a
in
special episode
fucking
on
England, where everything comes out like fucking 2 months after America. So like, fuck, it's sad.
Damn.
Yeah, we have to wait.
It's only
Oh, sorry.
select theaters too out here even.
It comes
Yeah.
out January 6th.
Yeah,
but
fucking January 6th.
Really?
Yeah, I know. Of all days. Of all days.
I kind of want to.
Day after my birthday. What a great day.
I kind of want to one of the last ones I watched at the theater at work.
Oh yeah.
Because that will be special.
Yeah, that would be special.
It'll make it worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely. But no. I don't know. We can't see it till January, so don't spoil anything for us.
Never mind. Well, I guess everyone else's homework is to have watched it by that time. So, because I think it'll be pretty relevant to the book club.
Okay,
Awesome.
that's amazing.
Awesome.
Wow, so another synchronicity. Okay,
Well,
cool.
yeah.
Cool.
You bringing up Jerusalem again, so I feel like that was the most kind of compelling and complete idea of what the afterlife could / maybe even should be.
I was just having the conversation about it like literally not an hour ago.
Yeah.
Funny enough.
So I don't know if this will kind of maybe give me a more ancient, similar kind of complete. Oh yeah, if this as an idea it was a thing, I would sign up for it. This is fucking great. This like makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I don't know. It's I'm not sure what kind of expectation to go into it with because of the kind of context of what the text is, but because it's been so influential, it must have some pretty good nuggets. And it does sound like it's incredibly relevant beyond even death. And just
that's what I was about to say. Like, let's bring some Persephone energy up in here because we've been talking about death for a little bit too long. And yes, it does pertain to life as well and the constant process of transformation that everybody's going through. I know that we have a few Saturn return babies in here.
What do you mean?
How many of us are currently going through our Saturn return, or one, two,
Mine's
or
in
are
February.
approaching? Oh, yours is in February. Okay. And are you, Courtney? Are you approaching yours, or have you been through yours?
I'm on the tail end of it, so I'm
You're on
coming
the
out the
tail
other
end.
side.
Cool.
What does that mean? How
we
does that
we have
work?
to look at your chart, Jake. You bet.
My chart.
We have to look at your
All right.
chart.
You keep tell me the things I need to enter, and then
No,
you keep
later.
talking.
We'll do
Oh.
it later. It's
Fine.
complicated. What was the thing?
It's
Yeah.
complicated.
It's relevant to obviously the process of death and rebirth that happens in the psyche, um, which happens constantly. It happens in the stages of life. It could happen whether you have big life changes and upheavals. And yeah, I think that we're going to learn a lot from this in terms of how to apply the concepts within the Bardo Thodol to our everyday life. And I think that that's also part of what's made it popular. I think it's the major part of what's made it popular. The death stuff, yes, but mainly the applying it to life stuff. And then also applying it to things like psychedelic research as well, um, and applying it to the zeitgeist, the sort of spirit of the times in general, the sort of death and rebirth process that's occurring in this age of Aquarius, crazy upheaval moment that we're in as well.
Oh wow! So it's like a fucking thing around your 30th birthday, basically.
Yeah.
Oh great! So yeah, I'm going through mine as
Your
well.
Saturn
Then.
return.
Amazing. And this is when all the trials and
Yeah,
tribulations
that
come,
is when all
and
the
your
trials
life
and
has to
tribulations.
totally change
Yeah,
in
well,
some fashion
it's
or
like a
another.
life review kind of thing, because it's like the first time you have life to look back on in a way, like to properly reflect back on.
Mhm.
Like when you're 24 years old, it's like how much life are you fucking reflecting on? Like you're fucking 10, like who gives a shit? By the time you hit 30, you're actually looking back at some life lived. So it's like Saturn is like, what have you done at this point? What have you accomplished? What have you wasted time doing? Like all of those things start rushing in. Um, and like, yeah, it's like the quarter life crisis, whatever sort of thing. And yeah, I feel like listening to Dark Side of the Moon hits different at 30. There's that one line where it's like, you are young and life is long and there is time to kill today. And I remember listening to it when I was like 24.
Oh god.
Yeah, I
Um,
thought
I remember listening to that when I was 16
yeah.
and being like,
Same here.
fuck,
I
bro.
used to know
Like,
how
what
to
the
I'm
fuck?
Yeah, yeah. It's just,
Roger Waters once said in one interview that the inspiration behind the lyrics of Time is that when he studied 29, his Saturn return, he had this realization, oh, I'm not a kid anymore. Shit.
Mm.
yeah. I it's like the Puella
It's its 50th
thing.
anniversary this year, and also was released basically on my Saturn return.
Dude, too many synchronicities. Too many synchronicities.
Did
Amazing.
you? Oh god, have you listened to any of the Redux, Jake?
Yes, I have listened
He
to a
was
couple of tracks
mixing
and
it.
was no.
Was
I
it a
wasn't
little?
mixing.
Oh no,
Was it a
Definitely.
little
what were you
rough?
I
doing?
fucking wish, dude. Jesus.
What you did something. What was it that you did?
I had to do some theatrical mastering for some of the playbacks and stuff for the
Oh man.
version of it. So I listened to it a lot of times with a lot of different people and stuff, and it was really interesting. Like even like really top people, Warner's like record labels and stuff. We would listen to it through, and there's a little bit I think just before Money where the piano is like ringing out and it kind of raises up and goes back down again, and everybody else in the room was like, "Oh shit, it's the first time I've ever heard that." It's like, this is the first time you've ever listened to this album, isn't it? Let's just be completely fucking honest.
Oh
like,
my
let's just,
God.
lay it out there. Like, this is actually crazy. It was giving me massive flashbacks to me just being super fucking stoned, lying on my bedroom floor playing bass along with the entire album after like learning it from this book I'd gotten. Is yeah, definitely
Oh.
a big part of my life.
Who
So
was the lady that was at the screening? The daughter of
Gala? That's Rick Wright's daughter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
She's
Oh wow.
she's
really
really sweet.
nice. She's
Yeah.
a sweet lady. But yeah,
Yeah, I don't know.
listen to that whole album again, along with this journey that we're about to embark on. And then also there's I'll put a little treat in the Discord. There's a reggae version called Dub Side of the Moon.
I've heard that before, actually.
It's
It's
fucking amazing.
awesome.
It's so good. I thought it
Cool.
would be corny.
It is really good.
Well, Jake was playing it, and I was like, "What the fuck is this? Like, stop this!"
And
This is
then
disgusting.
if you
Like, why would anyone do this to such a legendary album? But then
It's not the
I got
nostalgia
really-
critic, The Wall, or anything. It's not like
No,
that
no.
egregious.
so good though. I got
It is
into
good.
it. It's like really good.
if
I'll
you
put
like
it in the Discord.
if you like Dubside, they went and double dipped and did Dubber Side of the Moon, which is like even more electronics and like fucking tripped out arrangements and stuff.
It's
and
crazy.
It's
They
fucking
they
Yeah.
also it's like some reggae like arrangement or whatever, and they cover like big albums. They've done Radiohead's OK
That's a
Computer.
good one as well.
They did
Oh,
Sgt.
that's cool.
Sgt. Pepper, and they
Sgt.
did
Pepper's
yeah.
is a good one as well.
But I'll put Dub Side of the Moon in case you're bored of the old version and want to listen to something new. So yeah, I'll put that in the
I
Discord.
feel like it does hit different but the same.
Yeah.
That
Definitely.
reminds me a lot of the Talking Heads album that was recontextualized by an African band, which is like obviously Talking Heads were very heavily influenced by a lot of African music. And then
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
hear it in a more traditional way, it's like it's even more like endearing and beautiful, like to just heard with different ears. It feels like, even though they feel like very different albums, what's presented and the way that it's presented is so jovial and like. But there are a lot of themes of like, you know, of a lot of stuff that we talk about. But and I'm not the biggest Talking Heads fan, but I do appreciate that album in particular. I mean, it's hard not to like that album. It's really
Remain
great.
Lights.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so before we move on to discussing the structure of everything, are there any other things that we want to get off our chest? Questions we have, historical stuff. I do have a lot of historical stuff in my head, so ask questions about it
I
to
feel like
prompt me
I
if you
feel like
want to know
I
stuff.
feel like whilst you're doing your little side Book of the Dead project of listening to this other accompaniment,
Hmm.
I should try and also listen to what Alan Watts had to say, like comparing it with the I Ching,
Oh yeah.
because that was his whole big thing, and what Robert Anton Wilson and Tim Leary got a big boner for with Alan was like him mapping the Tibetan Book of the Dead along with the I Ching. And it's
Oh,
like,
cool.
this is fucking genius.
Nice.
Divination with all of it. He was like, yeah, this is crazy, and I feel like you would dig
So
that as
you're
well.
on wizard duty, and
Yeah.
I'm on like keeping things structured and like whatever. Great, awesome.
Oh, is that some of your own grown business there, Sid?
This is some of the purple, the Menemsha.
Nice,
It smells like tangerine. It's quite
Amazing.
citrusy and nice.
amazing.
But I'm just trimming it up.
Nice.
when we
one
start our cult, our commune, that's your job. You can have
Oh yeah, I will grow all the vegetables and all of the herbs.
One thing I'll be interested in from you guys is like we all have, whether we're certain about it or not certain about it right now, some conception of what our own deaths will be like, whether it's afterlives and heavens or nothingnesses or judgments and stuff like that. I would be curious to track my own and your guys's and assess if it changes in any meaningful way during or after reading, right? Like, do you read? Does it transform what you think is going to happen to you, or does it stay safely intellectually over here for you throughout the read? It'd be cool to see.
All right. Well, that's a really interesting idea, Alex. I love that. So why don't we all go around and sort of talk about what our current understanding and idea is of the afterlife, and then we'll do the same at the end of this and see what the answers are.
Okay. Who wants
Cool.
to? Should we just go like this? We'll go this way, like that way. Okay. So I'll go first. I guess I'm still afraid of hellfire. I'm still afraid of hellfire because of my Christian upbringing, but that's all like unconscious, like bullshit, like repression. On top of that, the layer above that, like weird stuff. I guess I kind of consciously believe in the idea of like a return to unity in some form or fashion, or a return to some form of like undifferentiated consciousness, whether or not that undifferentiated consciousness becomes differentiated again through reincarnation, or if it like becomes enlightened but remains undifferentiated in that way, or if it's just undifferentiated primordial ooze. I don't know what the fuck happens. Like, I'm really interested in like the Kabbalistic notion of the chambers of Guff, which is like the place where souls are housed before they are born, and after they die, and they're sort of in an unconscious state. Basically, they're just sort of in the void. Um, there are all kinds of different ideas that I find intriguing, but I can't say that I've necessarily settled on any. It's a mystery, and I kind of like that it's a mystery. But yeah,
Hmm.
what about you?
Yeah, same. I haven't. I mean, I grew up secular and atheist, so I don't really have any programmed beliefs about what's going to happen when I die. But I like ideas and I like exploring ideas. And as I said, I think the idea of eternalism and what Alan Moore poses through his cosmology in Jerusalem is the nicest and makes most sense in so many logical ways, to me, more than pearly gates or reincarnation even, or any of that. It kind of makes a lot more logical sense to me. But I'm definitely not sold on it. It's just like a nice idea, and it is a novel, a fictional novel at the end of the day. Right. So but
Why?
the philosophy and the ideas posed in it are pretty real. But
Why not the Egyptians do art?
I don't know enough about it, and I think culturally as well, it kind of needs to
Why
make
not?
sense to you. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
part of what I like
true,
about eternalism is that he's able to locate it in Northampton.
true.
And anybody that reads and understands that book can see those threads and the same things unfolding within the very place that they live in, no matter where that is in the world,
That's very true.
and how we're very connected to the world
Hmm.
and the changes that happen around it. So
Hmm.
yeah, but I'm not sold on anything like as same as you. So I'm very interested to be posed new ideas and such through the
Yeah,
Book of the Dead.
yeah.
Mhm.
Alex, you go.
Sure. Yeah, so Baruch Spinoza is a philosopher that I connect to very deeply, and he was one of the first writers or thinkers that like made me test out, like, oh, maybe I do like want to feel a claim about death instead of just the who knows anything goes mentality. Not that that's not an
Mm.
incredibly valid place to be. One of his concepts is and he precedes them very logically forward. So it's going to sound very mystical, but he like very philosophically proceeds to this. It's sort of put that like whenever you contemplate actually true ideas about yourself or life or the world, your individual mind in that moment of thinking a true thought joins the mind of God, like, and it becomes in union. Because very similarly to some Eastern uh, concepts of this, like the separation between the you and the all is kind of an illusion that we kind
Mhm,
of confuse
mhm,
ourselves
mhm.
into having. And in this way, he also says Spinoza is very interested in time, and if we think about it ourselves, death is really only meaningful in relationship to time.
Mm,
Because
mhm,
a
mhm,
lot of
mhm,
people talk about how you don't really care about the time before you were born. You weren't dead 100
mhm,
years ago, so why are you dead 100 years from now,
mhm,
and
mhm.
but Spinoza makes this claim of like if we practice our lives through seeking the contemplation of true things like the concept of God in the way he frames it as a true idea, or joy and love and truth and these attributes that he says have the ability to assess as actually true, we can in this way kind of become eternal when we pass because of so many moments spent uniting to the eternally true
Mhm,
God
mhm.
idea. And like I said, like you've got to be like 300 pages in to like feel like you've got all of his chess pieces in front of you to go, oh, I get what he's talking about. It sounds like kind of loopy outside of it, but the couple of times I've read through his book and get to that point, I go, oh my God, I think like eternal life actually like is a philosophically possible thing insofar as your body isn't the thing being eternally alive, but the idea of you being in union with the all
The
is. And
all,
so
yeah.
that kind of like makes me feel a lot more chilled out about it
Yeah,
myself.
yeah.
So
It
yeah,
sounds very
so
similar to Jung's concept of the afterlife and his
mhm.
concept of time and synchronicity and all of this stuff. It sounds
Yeah.
maybe he was even inspired by Spinoza's, thoughts on it. I'm not sure, but
Almost
yeah.
sounds like
That'd
quantum
be sick.
physics in a way as well, where
It did.
like
Yeah.
someone would or would not be connected to the eternalness through chance of them not or connecting with it, and that can be you don't know. It's like Schrodinger's cat kind of thing. Like, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Literally, and we'll have to cut myself off, but like triangulating Spinoza through every other field of life is like what I've been doing for the last like 5 years. I'm obsessed. So I'm thrilled to hear you make a connection to it.
Definitely. It's like me
Cool,
with
cool.
Jung. It's like a dog with a bone.
Totally.
um, who wants to? Who's next?
Boyan.
Yeah, Boyan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm quite fascinated by the idea of like from Buddhist perspective. I remember there was this idea of the All Mothers. Or, I don't know what it was called, but basically the idea was that everyone at some point was everyone's mother. And then there was this story, I think it was called The Egg, where it was about a soul that died, and then it turned out that each reincarnation it lived through every single human being alive. So then it was Hitler in one life, and it was Mother Teresa in another, and then it was kind of also detached from time. So like your next reincarnation wasn't necessarily going to be in the future as we perceive it, but it could have been in the past. And then this whole thing was about this human soul evolving through each experience that they have on the earth. And I don't know, I was like not strictly, but grew up in a like Christian Orthodox culture. So then there was the concept of heaven and hell. But I remember kind of, I was a teenager at the time, and I had this vision where, like whatever life you live, like whatever karma you gather, then after you die, then you join like almost like an ocean current that has like similar karma, and then you kind of flow with people that have the same vibration as you.
Energy.
And then I don't know if
Wow.
you interact with the others, or if you enter an equilibrium, or you have to like go through like a temperature change. But this has really, I don't know, like this visual still stays with me after so many years.
Wow, that's amazing.
Cool.
That's so cool. When did you have this vision?
I don't know, I think it was maybe 17 or 18.
Wow.
That's a good
And
time
what
for
was
it.
how did was it like a waking vision or a dream?
It was, I remember we were trying to watch a meteor shower.
Wow.
So maybe it was like the space and then the liquid, and yeah.
That's amazing. Wow.
Pretty sick.
That's pretty cool. That's amazing. Wow. Sid, do you want to go? Do you want to tell us about your conception of the afterlife?
You might be rolling a fatty right now.
Yeah.
Or a teeny corn on the cob.
Should we go the
Yeah,
other
let's
way
go to
down? Should we
George.
go down to Courtney and then
Yeah, we'll go down.
across?
We'll go down to Courtney and then across. Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of links to something that's clicked into place for me recently, is like kind of understanding this subjective experience of a continuous process around death, and kind of relinquishing and going into like the bardo. I had previously, for some reason, I guess, just thought that things stopped. And I knew that there was like this afterlife, but then I never really put myself in the subjective experience of what that would be like as a continuous process. So I kind of liken it to like, when you take some psychedelics or something and you're kind of waiting for it to come on, you have to relinquish and you go into this space and you don't really know what's going to be shown to you. You don't really know what's going to come up. But you've got to kind of like remain on that track. So yeah, I don't know, the afterlife, I kind of see it as like my soul separating and either coming back through reincarnation or going back home. And I guess that's kind of like the unity consciousness, or like, going back to where my soul came from. Because it doesn't feel like it's from here.
Yeah, I feel those feels for sure. Definitely.
But I resonate. Jake, you said something the other day about like you have like you could live 300 years, and that would allow you to fit all of the things into your life that you want to do. And that kind of that stayed with me, because I was like, 300 years. It's like that makes sense in why people would choose to come back, because already I'm like, oh, there's stuff that I just can't do in this lifetime. I'm gonna have to come back and like I'll file that away for another life.
It's interesting. Even or Jung's concept of unlived lives, and the way he talks about the dead in the 7 sermons of the dead, to the dead. Sorry, he talks about the dead as if they're sort of this massive unlived potential, and I think that he really truly did believe that. Like he saw the dead as like unlived potential, and saw the dead as a concept as being intrinsically linked to the collective unconscious as well, which I find really interesting. And I think that the Bardo Thodol also speaks of the dead in very similar terms, where it's like very abstract and it can sort of be applied to many, many different concepts. So yeah, like that's one thing we should definitely put a pin in is this concept of the dead. What exactly are we referring to when we say that and stuff? But yeah, J. George, what's your concept of the afterlife?
Well, for most of my life, I believed in heaven and hell and purgatory. If you're a good person, you went to heaven, see like all your dead friends and family and heroes. If you're a bad person, you stay in hell, fucking Hitler and God knows who else. If you're a good person, like whatever, like you still need to be tested, you went to purgatory. But now, like more, like I've become like interested in the idea of reincarnation and like in the possibility of escaping reincarnation, which the Book of the Dead talks about quite a lot. So I try to imagine myself like, what if like 2 afterlives ago, like a poor Irish farmer, like, instead of being like a black dude in Brazil, like it's really interesting to like, just like ponder, you know.
Have you had like past life dreams or something of a life in Ireland? Is that why this reference comes to mind?
It's a random thing I could think of.
Just unconsciously, maybe. You saw Banshees of Inisherin and it just
and it resonated with the donkey. Yeah.
Well, I do have a friend who like treated me like what's his like name? The guy who's not
the mean one.
Big guy.
Yeah. Mad Eye Moody, right? Yeah, whatever his name is.
Wow. Sid, would you like to go?
That was Brendan Gleeson. Put some respect on this. He is great. He is a great actor. I love him in Bruges, which was kind of like the Banshees of Inisherin is kind of like a spiritual sequel to In Bruges, because it's the same characters coming back, obviously in different contexts. Same 2 actors, and they're kind of opposite of their characters in that, I guess, because they're literally contract killers. But I don't know. It's interesting because a lot of what each of the group here has brought up, I have very different, not entirely different takes, but like I find that a lot of those make up what I kind of see as the potential for what may lie beyond, and like how I envision, the afterlife or death, or, the stasis in between this world and the next. Like that idea I remember wanting to write this at one point about the idea that we are all living right now, this life experience, we are all of the same, like the Godhead, where you have already lived every life but now you are experiencing this, this life through this vessel, like through your form that you're currently in. But you will, the next cycle, you will be living another life in another time as another person who existed already. And in the end, that's that's what brings back like the God of all things, right? Is like that we're all one connected consciousness because we are the same being that has lived many different lives and in different forms, and that's where all this like lived experience comes from, and the connections to like past lives. I do believe could potentially be because of like we're realizing that we are connected because we have all been these people and lived these experiences, but we don't fully know or understand that. But I also mostly kind of feel like life in a lot of ways can be a bit like a waiting room.
A box of chocolates. Sorry, I couldn't help
Sorry.
I mean,
I
that's
couldn't help
I'm not going to get into my disdain for Forrest Gump. I think that's the worst thing Tom Hanks has ever done. But anyway, it's really not a great movie. It's too schmaltzy. It's not a terrible movie, but no, I think that we're kind of in the this. We live in this like kind of really mundane entropy for most of our existence, right? Like unless you're living in a really horrible situation where you have no like you have no security, you have no guarantee of like any kind of your life hasn't been planned out for you, and it's not going to be safe, and for whatever reason. We are going to be facing chaos. We're going to be facing things that we did not expect, and the serenity of moving on from this life is that it's like a form of chaos that is easier for us to contain, but also that the afterlife to me I think might be that we are it's what we think of, it's like what we have gathered in this time, in this vessel, in this experience in this life, and then we project what we are, what we believe we will see, or what we think that we are due at the end of that. But also you aren't going to be there forever again. That's just going to be another spot where you have to come back, and then but I guess it kind of comes back to the idea of reincarnation, but I think of it in more of a way of until you have at that kind of like final bell, that curtain call, like you are at peace in a way that it's like the whole ghost trope, right? Unfinished business, like you were talking about unlived lives, and we're talking about the Red Book again, like say that like somebody, it's I don't know, it's like in the opposite way of like a serial killer thinking that if they take a life then it gives them more life from the potential years. It's like a sci-fi concept. I think it might have even been done on like a terrible like anthology show or something, but like the lives that you are yet to live could bring you to the transcendence that we seek, but we don't know what it requires. So like you said, get to samsara or like nirvana or enlightenment, and that's what life is us trying to figure that out for ourselves in whatever way, and who knows when or what it will take for us to achieve that. So it's just kind of coming to that inevitable kind of the Egyptian, right? The like being weighed with feathers, right? Being weighed against the feather and seeing if your heart is as light as the feather, I think, right?
Definitely. One piece of homework, I highly recommend watching Alan Moore's Showpieces, which is a series of short films that he made. I think you can find them really easily online, or you can torrent them.
On the high seas.
Yeah, on the high seas. But there, he basically, it's the journey of the soul through the Egyptian duat, except the Egyptian duat is like a pub in Northampton. It's like
That's
genius.
great.
It's so genius. It's fucking brilliant. But if you're looking for more underworld material to titillate you during this underworld journey we're about to take, I highly recommend that. And before we move into what the game plan is, I thought it would be interesting to share our mystical experiences, if any of us have any, surrounding this sort of thing: consciousness, life, death, blah blah blah. So I'll go first. I remember, like, I think I was like 5 years old, and I was like obsessed with the question of where I came from before I was born, and I like kept asking my mom this over and over again. And she was a Christian, of course, and she was like, "Oh, you were up in heaven with God," sort of thing. And I was like, "I don't know. I don't know. I
Is that
feel
how
like
it works in Christianity?
I don't know. She just sort of told me something to shut me up. I think I don't think she really. There is. I don't. I mean, in Judaism, there's like the chambers of Guff, which I just mentioned.
Mhm.
Which, if you're an Evangelion fan, sorry to bring it up again, that's all. The chambers of Guff are mentioned in Evangelion. And that's in Judaism. That's sort of where souls hang out before they're incarnated. But my mom isn't a expert in Kabbalah, so
You
she
give her a
just
pass.
yeah, I gave her a pass. So she just told me, I was with God or whatever, but I didn't find that answer satisfying. So I remember going to my room and sitting in front of my mirror, which I did a lot as a kid, and just sort of staring at my reflection for a while until I sort of entered a trance, just sort of naturally. And I felt myself sort of become undifferentiated. It was like I had naturally induced ego death. And I was like, "Oh, this is it. This is where I came from before I was born," and sort
Wow.
of had that kind of feeling. But then I started to panic because I felt sort of separated from my identity, and I was like, "Oh shit!" And then I needed to remind myself of my address, my name, my mom's name. Just sort of, I was sort of grasping for anything to sort of bring me back down to earth. And I eventually did come back down, but it was like really frightening. And then I was like, oh, I'm not going to do that again. And I never did. But that was the first sort of ego death experience I had until I like started doing drugs when I got older. But yeah, that was like my first proper mystical experience, or what I later contextualized as a mystical experience. But yeah, anyone else want to share?
I remember I was probably 8 years old, and I had to undergo a surgery. And the moment I got under general anesthetic, I could see like leaving my body. It was like
Wow.
I was like, yeah, like in the operating theater, and then I was kind of going ascending up and up, and then I could see the town, and then the whole planet. But that's all I remember. But then I remember after
Wow.
waking up, I was very moved by it.
Wow.
Um,
That's such a common one as well. You hear people
yes.
say that
Later,
all the time.
I found out about the like people near death having near death experiences or having the same thing, and yeah, it was super fascinating. But
Mm.
but that was it. Like I didn't talk to anyone or anything like that. But then later on, like my mother is quite into these. She's quite into mystical, witchy things. She's also born on Halloween, and then
Good.
she
Amazing.
experienced the death of her partner, and then she went to see someone who speaks to the dead, whatever. And I went with her, and then this woman was speaking on the behalf of the dead person to her. It's like she was the channeler, basically. And the thing that struck me the most was he said, "I am here because I have a lot to learn," like wherever
Wow.
he was.
Wow.
And
Wow.
this also really stuck with me because it was also like the idea of, I guess, purgatory, but it's like wherever a soul goes, it's not the final endpoint. It's just like
Mm.
another realm.
Mhm. And that's kind of what the Book of the Dead is. It's like you trying to bargain to either get a better reincarnation or to get yeeted out of samsara or to be reborn into lower realms, basically. But the whole point of having the Lama read over the body of the passing individual is to sort of give them a little bit of a cheat sheet in these bardo states so that they can avoid being reborn into the
Like
sort of
reminders.
yeah. That's basically
Almost like the way
mm,
that the Tao Te Ching like notes to leaders, like reminders,
yeah, exactly.
like meditations
Exactly.
for leaders as
Exactly.
reminders. This is like reminders for souls
hmm
traveling
Traveling
through
through the
the
underworld.
underworld.
And it's the same thing with most books of the dead. It's the same thing with the Egyptian Book of the Dead. They were incantations that were said over the soul of the dying to help them through the perilous journey of the afterlife. And you know, in the Egyptian mythology, that would be the duat, and in the Tibetan view, it would be these bardos. The Greek underworld is also fucking fascinating. Like, I didn't realize how fascinating it was, but I've recently been studying it, and holy
There's
shit.
so much drama happening there.
I know.
Yeah.
And not even just that, if you like, the Platonist concept of the underworld is like fascinating. Like, even the rites and rituals were all about entering into the underworld in order to gain knowledge. And that was like a big part of what they did. So the underworld was seen as like a seat of knowledge, and also a place where one went to attain hidden knowledge. So it was seen as like a thing that philosophers should do regularly. They worked with chthonic deities a lot as well. A chthonic deity has been appearing in synchronicities recently for me as well, Hecate. So yeah, like that's been really interesting too. But yeah, the underworld in general is just like a really fascinating motif, and most of the books are, again, cheat sheets to help people navigate through the various states that the soul is supposed to go through. And it's interesting, when everyone was sort of talking about their views of the afterlife, this idea of it being sort of a journey, and also the fact that the idea of reincarnation as well was sort of a motif in a lot of the things that people were saying, or the idea of like transcendence. And I guess those are the two options that are offered in the Tibetan worldview. It's either you get reborn again, or you transcend and become enlightened. Um, so yeah, yeah. So I guess it's interesting because this is a very specific worldview, a very specific kind of religious worldview that is rooted in a very specific religious tradition. So yeah, that, bear that in mind, I guess.
The two I've had were like almost a combination of both of yours. Where the first time I did mushrooms, I had like total ego trip and a feeling of like absolute complete oneness and unity with the world. Hippie and like whatever the fuck it sounds, but it was like pure, complete and contentness. That was like exactly it, and understanding like your piece of the puzzle of the universe. Essentially, that's what it kind of like felt like to me. And then the first time I did acid, I almost similar to Boyan, is like I wasn't like going out of consciousness, but I definitely, my point of view traveled from my eyes to like the corner of the room, watching me and Angie and my other housemate at the time all watching the film we were watching.
We're watching Princess Kaguya.
Yeah. But I could see us all in third person, like there was a camera in the corner of the room.
Yeah,
And it was
yeah.
just like the most fucking weird thing ever. But then I'm also super into the idea of remote viewing and this concept and technology that's been unlocked by the CIA. So, yeah.
Well, like that's another weird thing. If you read all the weird fucking what was the name of the thing? The Gateway Experience documents or whatever. Like it sort of outlines this idea that like consciousness is connected, and that's what makes a thing like remote viewing
in the same way
work.
that like there's that idea. I don't know if it's like part of quantum theory as well, but basically the same atom, the same exact thing can exist in more than one place in the universe at any one given time. And so you, in the same way that consciousness can then connect to any of those instantaneous atoms because they are connected to everything, so they can zoom anywhere in time and space.
Yeah, it's interesting that like all these like concepts in these ancient books about the connectedness of consciousness and all this stuff, and then you read something like the Gateway documents from the CIA, and it's like all the same thing, and it's like, maybe their Agent Cooper is like real, and we just don't know it. Like, holy shit! But yeah, I think it's gonna be a really fascinating book club, and I'm like super excited to dive into the material. Any last thoughts before I dive into the game plan for the coming weeks?
I maybe something not to answer now, but and also I haven't read the red book. But the concept of individuation and then kind of dying and coming into one, then
Mm.
I'm interested to, I guess, to see what you guys think about how it works together, or
Oh
how
yeah.
would you
Oh yeah.
explain individuation through like dying.
Oh yeah. I'm interested to see how that comes together, if there are any like parallels we can draw when we dive into the material for sure. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, to get into the structure of things, so basically we're going to be doing the audiobook, which is on YouTube. I will post the link to the audiobook in the Discord, and we're going to do half an hour a week, basically, just to make it easy. And I calculated it, that should make it like a 7-week thing. And we'll obviously be skipping Christmas and New Year's. Those Saturdays, or sorry, those Sundays will be off limits or whatever. But it'll be like a 7-week kind of thing, half an hour a week, which I think is like an okay chunk. But if it's too much, let me know now, and I can like reorganize things.
Sounds
Is it
good.
good? Yeah, basically, yeah, that's all it is, like just half an hour a week. And then the supplementary material is on Audible. It's not mandatory because I'm going to be going through it myself and then coming week to week, kind of helping outline stuff. So you don't have to get it if you don't want to, but if you're personally interested, it is called the, hang on a second, I have it here. So it's the Tibetan Book of the Dead, by Lopsang Tenzin Dorje. I will write it in the Discord. I think I already have, but I will write it in the Discord
It
again.
was written as the option in the Patreon.
Yeah. It was written as the option in the Patreon, but it's all, I can write it again. It's not a big deal. But if you're interested in getting that to read along, then you can. And then was there another thing? Oh yeah, Alex is also. Do you want to talk about your book as well? You have a different version. Yeah.
It's simple. It's a different translation, and it does have some facsimile pictures from manuscripts. So when those are happening, when we're at that point, I'll upload them in the chat for the week. And I might propose, if there's like a really telling translation difference and we have time, it might be fun to kind of, does that change how we see it as Westerners, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Hell yeah, let's do that. So next week will be the first half an hour, which is I think basically the first third of the first half of the hang on a second, it's the clear light of reality, which is kind of where we're going to get to, the clear light of reality. But so if you're reading the supplementary material, the clear light of reality chapter is where you should end. It's all listed like on Audible, you can see it. So the clear light of reality chapter is where you should stop. And then in the actual main audiobook on YouTube, just like listen to the first half an hour, and we'll discuss that next week. Any questions? Amazing. Thank you guys so much for this book club. It was amazing, and I can't wait to see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thanks all for joining.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Have a good
That was
one.
all.
See you, fellas.
I'll
Bye.
see you
Good night.
next
That
day.
was great. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
See ya.